In this video, I'm going to be talking about what we learned from the closed beta of the First Berserker Khazan, including character customization, stats, and skills and skill trees. A lot of people, including myself, have been looking forward to this game since its reveal trailer back in TGA 2023, where we got a glimpse of its stunning cel-shaded artistry within a dark fantasy Souls-like world. We then got to play at Gamescom in August, but only for a very short amount of time. However, recently we got a code to try out the closed beta, thank you to Neople, and got to play 3 missions, which equate to about 7 hours of playtime. So today, I want to go over what we learned from that beta, along with some further impressions of the game, which could be the next big Souls-like. First, let's take a look at combat, this time with UI on, to give you a better idea of what's happening and a recap in case you missed our last video or just can't remember it. Let's go over the basics first. On the bottom left of the HUD, you have a health bar, stamina bar, consumables, and healing items known as Netherworld Energy. You start off with a dual-wielded axe and sword with light attacks, heavy attacks, and charged heavy attacks. The key system of combat is exhaustion. Attacking foes will deal damage to their health bar and their stamina bar, which once depleted will leave them exhausted. This opens a window to land some free hits and a brutal attack that regenerates your stamina and deals massive damage. However, enemy attacks can also damage your stamina, and if you get hit with low stamina, you will be exhausted for around 2 seconds. This system should be familiar to you if you played Nioh, Sekiro, or even Elden Ring, as it's quite similar to the ones found in those titles. For defense, you want to mainly be parrying enemy attacks to deplete their stamina meter while also mixing in some perfect dodges, which can lead to empowered dodged attacks. Like Sekiro, these defensive options will deplete your stamina, but will never completely exhaust you, meaning you can still be hyper-aggressive with attacks if you're confident that you can parry every attack thrown at you afterwards. Enemies can also execute unblockable burst attacks, which you can counterattack with a special input exactly like the burst attacks from Nioh 2. At the start of the First Berserker Khazan, the combat feels slow and methodical since you have to focus on managing your stamina bar. It's once you unlock the other 2 weapon types and the weapon skill trees, then combat starts to develop into a hack and slash, becoming more like Devil May Cry. The other 2 weapon types are a guts-like greatsword and an incredibly fast spear. Both weapons get their very own light attack and heavy attack strings, as well as separate skill trees with several unique abilities and passives that give the player many more options. Additionally, respeccing was completely free in the beta, so in the full launch, I believe you'll be able to swap between weapons at any point in the game very easily. Next, let's take a look at skill trees and skills. The dual wield tree has skills focused on complete frenzy, encouraging a ruthless and fast-paced slice and dice playstyle. Even the resource-free skills are gnarly, like a whirlwind attack lifting the enemy into the air and chopping them up, which can combo off any light attack or parry, or mobility moves that allow you to close the distance while slicing them up. The active skill Ruthless is especially awesome, really feeding into the Berserker playstyle. For the Greatsword, it starts off very slow, but has upgrades to make it feel more manageable, like an unstaggerable passive and some very fast active skills, such as the Giant Hunt skill, where Khazan leaps into the air and plunges the Greatsword downwards in an explosive AoE, or the defensive Warcry skill, which can counter an enemy attack and enhance attack. Lastly, the Spear is the most dexterous of the 3 and my favorite, designed to chain moves together to create infinite combos until you deplete all your stamina. It has a fantastic passive move called Moonlight, where you create after images after all your attacks if you can land a full light attack string. For active skills, the Crescent Strike skill plunges the spear into the ground for big AoE damage, and the after image thrust is a basic but effective consecutive stab move. The main gist of the playstyle is to experiment with all the chaining moves to create some fat combos, which can be quite daunting at first, but is actually easy to get the hang of. All in all, I think they did a really good job with combat. The animations play a huge part in making it feel good, but the base systems are all designed in a way where they strike the balance between being difficult while also feeling fair and fun to play. My only gripes while playing were some frustrating hitboxes against the final boss, and initially the slow pace with stamina management, which made me miss my green turtle talisman. Next, let's take a look at level design and progression. The First Berserker Khazan is divided into different regions with multiple checkpoints. Once you reach the end of Mission 2, you'll unlock the Firelink Shrine of the game, known as the Crevice. It looks like once the player reaches this point, the basic gameplay loop will be to go to a region, kill the main boss, then go back to the Crevice, and move on to the next region. From what I've seen, the game will be pretty linear since each region is detached from one another, and it won't have the connectivity of something like Dark Souls, for example. However, the content of the regions in the game are fairly well done. I noticed a lot of verticality when I was navigating through them, as well as quite a few branching paths that would lead to chests, items, or soul stones that are used to unlock abilities. I definitely wouldn't say that the level design is fantastic, but I do think it delivers sufficient exploration to underpin the combat. The progression of the game basically falls in line with every other Souls-like, but it does take some interesting liberties. In order to level up, you defeat enemies to earn Lacrima, which you can spend at a Blade Nexus checkpoint to level up your Vitality, Endurance, Strength, Willpower, or Proficiency. If you die, you lose all your Lacrima and have to do the run back to pick it back up. Where this seems to deviate is when you fight bosses. If you die to a boss, the Lacrima will spawn outside the boss room, and you will also seem to earn some Lacrima for having an attempt. Additionally, skill points are earned by attacking anything with your weapons, which means you're also earning skill points while dying to bosses. If this isn't just a beta feature, this is a pretty big difference from other Souls-likes, as your character will constantly be progressing while you spam attempts against bosses. I'm not completely sure how I feel about it, but if it's intended, I'm curious to see how they implement it for the full launch. Other than levels and skills, there are also some gear in the game that you can find in chests and from enemies. The frequency at which you get gear is similar to Dark Souls, with maybe 10 or so found per mission. However, the way that armor works is much more like Neo. Armor dropped will have defensive stats that scale with your current level, and will randomly drop between uncommon and epic rarities. You'll find a lot of the same gear pieces but with different rarities and also different attributes. There will also be random attributes for gear that is uncommon or greater, and some specific armor pieces will also have a fixed attribute that will always be dropped on it. Some pieces will also have set bonuses, but I wasn't able to try out any since the beta didn't have merchants or enemies to get a full set. From the few pieces I found, they seem to be very impactful to your overall build and playstyle. The purple chest set piece I found had some insane stats, like learning a whole new skill or minus 500% to stamina damage when you parry, which I assume means you gain 500% of the stamina lost back. That being said, there still isn't much build customization in the game yet. You will probably end up getting every skill in the skill tree, so there won't be variety like you would see in the likes of Neo. However, the depth of each weapon with passives and skills that can chain into each other creates many possibilities to learn and master as you progress the game. One last thing I want to touch on for the subject of gear are time rifts, which are basically revenants from Neo 2. You can summon revenants of adversity from red time rifts to get blue set gear, as well as special Lacrima of circulation. You can use these on yellow time rifts before bosses to summon a spirit of advocacy who helps you in the boss fight. Lastly, I want to give some final thoughts on the story and setting now that I've had a proper playthrough of the beta, but be warned, there are spoilers. As you probably know, Khazan is a war general turned death row inmate after being accused of treason against the Pellos Empire. The game doesn't provide many details in the beginning, offering only a few vague lines about his conviction and the brutal torture he endured. We see him transported in a cage, bloodied and battered after they severed the tendons in both his arms, leaving him utterly powerless in the face of his impending execution. As he's being transported, the Blade Phantom stops the transport and inhabits his body, restoring both his arms with the Netherworld energy, while also trying to kick him out of his own skin. Once you reach Mission 2, Khazan has to face 3 divine trials in order to confront the Blade Phantom's physical form before his body is completely taken over. In this fight, it's hinted through design choices and death voice lines that Blade Phantom is actually the amalgamation of several warriors. Once Khazan defeats him, he proposes an alliance. Khazan needs his arms to take revenge upon the nobles and the Emperor, and the Blade Phantom needs his body to restore order to the Netherworld, so they agree to mutually coexist to accomplish each other's goals. But that's about as far as the story really goes at this point, but I think it's a great foundation for what could come next in the future. The mystery behind the Emperor's betrayal and the strange behavior of the Netherworld could be related and serve to make an interesting plot. The backstory of Khazan is told from hints in dialogue and notes you pick up, leaving it to the player to piece together his legendary fight against the Berserker Dragon, as well as the setting itself. The setting seems to include the existence of mages, powerful dragons, reptilian dragonkin, Seppo temple monkeys, and giant yeti monsters, with room to add much more given how broad the scope of the world seems to be. Overall, the story and setting of this dark fantasy revenge tale is honestly right up my alley, being clearly inspired by Berserk with its gritty atmospheres, gory combat, and of course the revenge-focused plot. It's also a breath of fresh air since most Souls-like worlds are set after the world has collapsed from some disastrous event, whereas it looks like here we'll be seeing the peak of an empire and maybe throwing it into anarchy. If they can continue building on the setting and keep the plot engaging, I think it could elevate the overall experience of the first Berserker Khazan to another level. Final thoughts. Graphically, Khazan stands out as having one of the best looking art styles in recent gaming history. The design in this game is simply phenomenal, and the 3D cel-shaded animation somehow strike a great balance between realistic movements and an anime style that allows for more flashy, intense visuals. The Blade Phantom in particular stands out to me as a really memorable design, always sticking out in some otherworldly demonic creature with his motif of eyes. The Phantom is initially shown as a bunch of creepy eyeballs at the start, and his physical manifestation from Mission 2 keeps that motif, with the Sauron-like armor and awesome spear move where a giant eye spawns behind him. Overall, I really enjoyed the beta for Khazan. I've been waiting for this since we played at Gamescom last month, and I think it's delivered basically everything I wanted. A gritty and gory revenge story set in a dark fantasy world with over-the-top visuals and fast-paced hack-and-slash combat. The game is not in a perfect state though. There are some performance issues like micro stutters, but the game does come out in early 2025, so hopefully there's time to fix this before release, because performance is such a big issue this day and age in the gaming industry. It will be tough though to compete with 15 other some odd games coming out in that time period, but from the quality I've seen during the closed beta, you should definitely keep this on your radar, as it could shape up to be the best Souls-like we've gotten since Lies of P. So what do you guys think of the first Berserker Khazan now, having seen more of the menu screens, the skill trees, the itemization of the game, knowing a little bit more about the story? How does it appear to you? Are you going to be keeping your eye out for this one in February? Let me know in the comments below.